Today on Retire with Purpose, creating lasting income from real estate, your withdrawal war chest, and how much you actually need to retire.
Welcome to Retire with Purpose, a show specifically designed to help you maximize your financial confidence in retirement. Casey Weade is the CEO and Chief Visionary of Howard Bailey Financial, a certified financial planner and Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He's your host on Retire with Purpose.
Hey, great to see you again. I'm Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade, certified financial planner. He is the president of Howard Bailey Financial, the Wall Street Journal best-selling author. He also hosts the Retire with Purpose podcast, and that's where we're going to begin today. Tell me more about your recent interview with Steve Parrish.
We had an amazing interview with Steve Parrish. This has quickly become one of our most downloaded podcasts that are out there today. It was episode number 179. Steve Parrish, the way I was originally introduced to him was he was one of my finance professors. He teaches the CLU and RICP programs. He is a professor of finance. He is also a teacher or a professor of law at Drake University, where he teaches an estate planning course. And so this is a guy that knows his stuff. He has more designations than you could fit on a business card unless it kind of rolled out. He is a very smart guy. And the neat thing about Steve is that when we interviewed him, he had just stepped into retirement and he had planned his own retirement. So we were able to get some insight into how someone with that level of academia and academic background would actually plan for their own retirement. Prior to that, what jump-started me reaching out to Steve was an article that I came across that he had written, and he is a prolific writer. He writes for Forbes extensively, and it was a Forbes article on commonly misunderstood yet useful tools in retirement that we made as part of our weekend reading for retirees that you can sign up at retirewithpurpose.com to receive. And so we kicked it off with just asking, Steve, what is the most misunderstood retirement tool today that's still useful? This is what he had to say.
I suppose today, probably the biggest one you hear that's really changing quickly is the whole area of annuities. And I can say that because at the American College, you've had several professors who've talked about it, and we do the numbers and we look and go, in the right situation, it makes sense. But for various reasons, and I'm not even sure what they all are, annuities kind of got a bad name and they're kind of clumped in with others. And so that would be one of the misunderstood ones where you have to say, all right, let's call it whatever you want to call it. But if you need a tax advantage lifetime income, there are only so many products that can do that. Let's talk about what it is. So yeah, there are a lot of those kind of things out there. And I'm sure I have my own prejudices. In fact, I will say, Casey, that I had a prejudice against reverse mortgages until I got to know professors at the American College, and they showed me some of the numbers and went, oh, okay. I read some just general articles. I really didn't do my research until they showed it to me. And in the right case, it can fit.
We all have our own biases, and we need to recognize those. It's okay to have a bias. We can't do without bias in our lives. However, we have to recognize what it is and where it comes from. One of those long-term biases that I've had, as well as my dad, being a financial advisor for 40 years, was to that of variable annuities. Until one day I came across a client that had a variable annuity that was very high cost, but they needed to keep it in a variable annuity to keep it tax deferred. We were able to transfer it from that variable annuity that had multiple percentages of annual cost over to one that cost $25 a month and had very low cost index funds inside it, and allowed them to continue to keep those dollars tax deferred, which at their income level was really important. So even tools that are generally not that good, maybe even reverse mortgages mean that to you, it doesn't mean that they're always bad. Being that we're talking to Steve Parrish here on the Retire with Purpose podcast about retirement income planning as one of our core subjects, we had to talk about the 4% rule. He shares with us here why the 4% rule, also known as a systematic withdrawal strategy, really isn't a retirement income strategy, one that we should never use, and one that really, even if you think you're using it, you probably aren't.
Because the trouble with the systematic withdrawal is that's more of an academic solution in the sense that all things being equal, looking at past history, you can make it to age 90 and it won't collapse. But the fact is, what if you have that money in something like 10-year bonds and It's going to take a while before you can recover that. And if you surrender it early, you're going to take a market hit. The bucket approach really segments your assets and doesn't cause you the practical problems that just severing off 4.5% would. Let's be, and I know you're aware of this, but in reality, no one just takes 4.5% of a mutual fund. That'd be crazy, because you'd be taking all kinds of risk and all kinds of hits you don't need to. What you would do is put on some guardrails. You would make sure some of that money is still liquid. You might put some money in deferred annuities. In reality, the 4.5% is more of a concept than it is reality.
You'll find on our podcast that we like to have people like Steve on, individuals that approach these conversations from an academic standpoint and try to leave those biases behind as best they can. And what if you're out there on the internet and you want to find those resources? What if you're reading an article and you go, boy, I never knew that, but you want to know if it's true. Is it disinformation or not? Is it true or false? Steve shares with us here why you need to always check your sources and how to make sure what you're reading is the truth.
The general consumer, and I don't claim to be an expert on social media, but a lot of that, and people have gotten smarter about that, is to check where the source is. In other words, you read an article and where really is that coming from? Are they making these big, massive conclusions that say reverse mortgages are a ripoff or reverse mortgages are always good? Then you worry about it. I think if it's that process of sifting through it. And I have to say one other thing is, and it depends on who you're talking to and what their situation is, but in many cases that's what the advisor can help on. And the advisor can come from many different areas, but I just mean, I think it used to be that advisors, they were the keeper of the information, but then they invented the internet. So we all have access to all the information. It's more, you may need somebody to help you interpret the information.
So how do you find the right person to help you interpret that information? Steve Parrish has literally trained thousands of financial planners across the country, some even across the globe. And so he has some behind the scenes knowledge, some good insight into what those leading indicators are to help you find a good advisor.
One of the things that at least can be an initial indicator is what level of commitment they've had through designations. So at the American College, we have the Retirement Income Certified Professional. We have, I think most people know the term CFP. So those indicate at least the person made a commitment to their own career. It doesn't suddenly make them a perfect person or anything else, but it's an indicator of that. A second, obviously, is referrals. I mean, other people that have used that, I would be a little careful with that, because what's good for Henry isn't necessarily good for Sally. But that's a way of looking at it. And then your own research on it, where you, and frankly, you can do broker check to see if there's any complaints with FINRA. FINRA is the government organization that monitors all this, checking to make sure they're doing well. You do your homework on that just like you would on, I just recently bought a boat. Well, guess what? I looked at it a lot of different ways, and I saw, I asked for people's referrals. I checked it on the web. It's the same kind of process.
Yeah, he just bought a boat, so he really is retired, isn't he? Yeah, that's right. Well, listen, if you'd like some additional help in getting yourself ready for retirement, we have a special offer for you today. I hope you'll be taking advantage of. Casey and the Howard Bailey team are hoping that you'll be one of the next 10 callers to request their step-by-step retirement planning checklist. It's going to walk you through the top 10 things you need to do to think about a secure and confident retirement. It's a great resource for action items you can begin implementing right now, and it's going to tell you exactly how to keep your financial future on track. So for the next 10 callers, you can request the retirement planning checklist by calling 866-482-9559. That's 866-482-9559, offered to you with no cost and no obligation. All right, when we come back, Marshal Johnson joins Casey. They're going to take a look at how you can avoid being trapped by fake financial news that can derail your retirement. So stay with us.
Hi, Casey Weade, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action. Hey, and welcome back. I am now joined by my good friend and co-host of the Retire with Purpose podcast, Marshal Johnson is here with me. And we are now going to turn our attention over to one of our weekend reading for retirees articles. What is weekend reading? Well, it's a collection of 4 articles sent to you every single Friday. You can sign up at retirewithpurpose.com. 4 articles on trending topics in the retirement planning space, all designed to keep you on top of those latest trends so that you can make the best decisions for your retirement. And then every Friday, Marshall and I, we go out and we choose one of those 4 articles and we do a podcast on it, full length. You can check that out at our site as well. That's episode number 159. And this one is from Forbes, where it covers fake news about retirement. So Marshall, why did we choose this particular topic?
Yeah, fake news, right? It's been said that we're no longer in the age of information, we're in the age of disinformation, and that can be absolutely true when it comes to advice or topics on the internet about retirement. So this was one that hit home for us. We see a lot of this biased mindset, garbage that comes out, and we like to illustrate that.
Well, that's really why we started weekend reading in the first place, is because it's difficult to get out there and find good information from sources that you can trust. And earlier in our show, we had a special guest, Steve Parrish, on, who was a finance professor for many years, and he shared with us how important it is to check your sources before you start believing what you found on the internet. This particular article really focused in on 401ks largely. There was some other great information that was in that article, but it largely focused on 401ks. If you would have followed through and checked the source, you would have found out it was written by someone who focused their practice, their business on doing 401k consulting.
So wait, the article about fake news was fake news? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, it wasn't all fake news, but I thought it was a fun opportunity for us to point out some areas where, hey, this is a little biased, this is some fake news, but this is some really good information you're going to find in this article as well, things that we hear all the time, number one of which has to do with Social Security. Quite often we hear from individuals that say, hey, Social Security is not going to be there. I don't want to plan on Social Security being there. I'm never going to see a dime out of it. And that is fake news, that you won't see a dime from Social Security, especially if you're in or near retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is dangerous, quite honestly. It's dangerous to not plan for Social Security to be there. It doesn't mean it can't be reduced. There is problems with the Social Security trust. We know that there's going to be some issues in the future, but it's going to get resolved, and maybe it's reduced for younger folks, but as you said, those that are at retirement, in retirement, or near retirement, this is just dangerous advice that could cause people to be taking on more risk than they otherwise wouldn't.
Well, it all depends on your definition of broke. So is Social Security broke? Yeah, if you count it based on the assets that they have, but they still have substantial income.
It's getting there, right?
There will be substantial income once that trust fund runs dry to cover about 75% of your benefits. And that still means this is a huge part of 99% of Americans' retirement income strategy. We need to scrutinize that to ensure that we're making the very best decision on when we file for Social Security. So if you're trying to make this Social Security decision, when do I file? We can do that analysis in our office at absolutely no cost and show you how to maximize those benefits and also stress test the Social Security strategy you put together in case there is a reduction in your benefits moving forward. Number two?
Number 2, they were talking about being well diversified, right?
Yeah, being well diversified in your 401k. And this is a really important point because for most individuals we run into, there's a couple of different things that happen when you choose 401k investments. You might be just randomly choosing a bunch of different ones going, hey, I heard it was important to be diversified. I'm going to choose 15 different funds and now I'm diversified, now I'm safe. Number 2 is quite often we hear, well, we chose the best performing funds. We chose the 1, 2, 3 different best performing funds. Both of those are flawed ways to make your 401k allocation decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see this all the time. We even have friends that sometimes go, well, this one made 25%. Why wouldn't I put it all into that one? The problem becomes, Casey, is a lot of times people overweight 3 or 4 funds that are doing very similar things. And we see this from a fund overlap perspective. We start to see stocks that get highly concentrated. You might be in 5 different funds, but they may all be large cap funds or have very little diversification. So you're not actually achieving that diversification.
And if you're having this problem of determining where you should allocate your 401k, we can put together a 401k analysis for you, X-ray your 401k, as we often talk about, to share with you what's in there, if you are highly concentrated, truly diversified, and appropriately allocated. Another point in this article, we're going to cover a couple out of the 10. Do you make too much to contribute to a Roth IRA? That is false. You can still find a way into a Roth IRA, even if you're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. There are ways around that.
Yeah, there are ways, but trying to get educated on those ways, that's where it may lead somebody down the path of the Google searches, and it may lead to disinformation. There are ways to get that done, and by sitting down with a financial planner that can really walk you through those options, teach you about super Roths, and they talk a little bit about backdoor Roths, which you got to be careful about.
There's a lot of different ways that we can create a tax-free income strategy for you, regardless of how much income you're currently creating. There's always an opportunity for everyone that we meet with in order to minimize the taxes you're paying today and into the future. The fourth point that we want to hit on here is a big one, and that is that you should always roll your 401k when you retire into an IRA. That's not always true, so there's a valid point being made here.
Yeah, fake news. You know, oftentimes people are going to push that narrative because they want you to roll over your 401k so they can manage it for a fee. The article kind of goes into some detail saying, well, you may be able to have lower cost and better service while staying in your 401k. And Casey, that's not something that we necessarily agree with.
That's not what we often see.
Yeah.
There was a little bias in there.
Yeah, right. So
Now,
there's a little bit of fake news.
This isn't always
in.
true. Yeah, in some 401ks we've audited, we have found individuals paying over 3% per year.
Right.
You can pay a fraction of that and have true financial advice at your fingertips. And very rarely do we ever see someone at an employer getting great financial advice from the 401k provider. So it's very rare. However, there are some reasons that you shouldn't roll over that 401k. The biggest of which, well, boy, they're both pretty big. Yeah. We have if you own employer stock inside of your 401k is a big one. And number two is if you're going to retire before age 59 and a half.
Prior to age 59 and a half, everybody knows that in their IRA, if they touch their IRA funds prior to 59 and a half, there's a penalty. Not if you've attained age 55 and it's still in the 401k. So a lot of times we're counseling individuals to keep some funds in their 401k for emergencies or that time horizon between 55 and 59 and a half.
Well, and if you own employer stock inside of your 401k, you absolutely need to call us so that you can make sure and see if there's ways that you can take that stock out of that 401k and not at ordinary income tax rates, but at long-term capital gains rates. Big opportunity right now. And among other things that we want to do today is we want to offer you a 10-step retirement checklist right now. We've developed a 10-step retirement checklist to point out those areas that you should be focusing in on right now if you're preparing to step into retirement, and some specific action items for you as well. So call the number on your screen for that 10-step retirement checklist, and stick around, because when we come back, we're going to be discussing further the benefits of delaying Social Security and can you retire early? We'll be right back. Hi, Casey Weade, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action.
This is the part of the show where we put Casey to work answering your questions. And if you'd like to get a question to Casey, it couldn't be easier. Just go to retirewithpurpose.com, scroll on down on the page, you'll see a little instant message window there. Enter your question and it gets right to Casey, and hopefully we'll use you on the program here as we did with Andrew up in Niles, Michigan.
How can I position myself to retire earlier than the norm? What are some steps I can take in my 40s to be able to look at retiring in my early 50s?
Oh, Andrew, you've got an aggressive timeline there. You know, the average American is lucky to retire at all. So retiring in your early 50s means that you have to do what Dave Ramsey often says, right? You have to be willing to do things that other people just aren't willing to do so that you can live a life that many others won't get to experience. And so that either means that you have to make a lot of money, you have to increase that income dramatically so you can maximize your savings, But more importantly, it's how much you spend. How much are you spending? Look at the whole FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. It's all built around this one core concept of controlling your spending more than anything else. And secondly, developing passive income sources. So where can you start developing some of those passive income sources? Quite often, the individuals that we find that are retiring in their 40s or their 50s, they've created passive income in the way of royalties or real estate income, business income, where they're not operating those businesses. You want to continue to invest. And if you look at the theme there, you're not investing in your 401k. Those that find true wealth, those that are retiring that early, they didn't get rich by saving a bunch of money in their 401k. One of the biggest problems you're going to find with just maxing out that 401k and then trying to retire when you're 52 is that you have to wait until you're 55 in order to take penalty-free distributions from your 401k. But if you roll that to an IRA, you've got to wait all the way till age 59 and a half. So that can be really complicated if you've saved too much inside your 401k and you plan to retire early. You plan to retire at 65. Well, most people retiring at 65, they're doing it in more of a traditional sense. They're utilizing their 401k for income and retirement, and they probably don't have as many passive income resources. I'm going to plug one of my good friends here, Justin Donald of The Lifestyle Investor. He has a good book out there for younger individuals that are interested in generating passive income. He has an interesting way of looking at passive income, albeit it's much higher risk than what I am comfortable with myself. However, it might be the thing that's right for you. We do have some copies in our office. Feel free to email us at info@howardbailey.com. We'll send you out a copy of my good friend's book, Justin Donald, The Lifestyle Investor.
All right, let's move on to Brock and his question from here in Fort Wayne.
Do you recommend delaying collecting Social Security benefits if you have the means for other income in retirement?
Absolutely, Brock. I think when it comes to filing for Social Security, the first thing that you should think about is not filing for Social Security until you actually need Social Security. That is a core element of Social Security planning. That isn't a blanket statement, though. You have to be careful with those kinds of rules of thumb. That's just a rule of thumb. Don't take it until you need it. You need to run the numbers. I've worked with individuals where they have plenty of income, but we've been able to take it early, focusing on the net of that, of course. How much can we get net in Social Security early, and what if we reinvest that? Will that develop a better return rather than delaying that payment year after year? It might work out just that way. More often than not, we're delaying it until we actually need it. I've got one couple that was an engineer at an aerospace company, and they were ones that had pension options that were lump sum, 10-year certain. They had lifetime options, joint and survivor options. We elected to take their pension over 10 years from age 60 to 70, delay their Social Security to age 70, and convert all of their IRAs to Roth by the time they were 70. So when they turn on Social Security, they'd be able to keep all that Social Security and live the power of zero, that tax-free retirement that our good friend David McKnight, that was also on the podcast, talks so much about. If you want to get a copy of Power of Zero that talks about that concept, email us, info@howardbailey.com. We'll send you a copy of David's book.
And we're going all the way out to Danville, California for an email question from Sue, that is. Where is the best place to allocate my retirement money for the highest return with some degree of safety? I should point out that I'm not a fan of annuities, especially the variable type.
Well, Sue, I think the key question there is some degree of safety, because we have to recognize, whether we're financial planners, whether we're investors, that risk is relative. Risk means something different to you than it means to me. And some degree of safety to some would be a real estate investment, blue chip dividend stocks. It might be a degree of safety that you're finding with tactical money management, or even investing in highly rated bonds. Highly rated bonds can default. It's lower risk, though, so there is some degree of safety there. And so let's define what that means. Let's assume, though, that your idea of safety is, I want some safety, meaning that I can't lose my principal. I want to know that, outside of an end of the world scenario, I'll still have what I started with. Then we're talking legal reserve system. So what's a legal reserve system? That means that whatever you put in there is backed by dollars, backed by maybe the FDIC in the way of the bank. It may be backed by the Treasury in the way of Treasury bonds. It may be backed by the claims paying ability of a highly rated insurance carrier who is regulated by the states, required to keep dollar for dollar in reserves, that also has surplus capital, and then we also go back to state guarantees as well that back that up. So all three of those entities, treasuries, insurance companies, and the FDIC or banks, those are your three areas that you're going to find safety. Out of those three, if we look at the banks today, we know that banks are paying next to nothing on our CDs. We're earning next to nothing on a treasury today. And so the best option out of the three is probably going to be an insurance company. That's what my family uses and I use for our funds, that we want to make a better return that we could get on at a bank, but keep it relatively safe. There are fixed annuities that'll pay you a fixed rate of return that's probably 2 or 3 times what you're going to get at a CD at a bank. There are fixed indexed annuities that will tie your rate of return to the S&P 500, maybe giving you 30, 50, 70% of the gains in the market without any of the downside. And those are not variable annuities. I know you said I'm not fond of variable annuities specifically. I generally am not either, and that wouldn't offer any degree of safety. A variable annuity is going to be a product that's putting your money in the market.
So lots of good questions from you guys today. Thanks for that. And we have something to give you in return. And it's a special offer today. If you're one of the next 10 people, Casey and the team at Howard Bailey have put together a retirement guide, and we'd like you to have a copy. It is a 10-step guide for retirement planning, a checklist that walks you through the top 10 things you need to be thinking about to make sure you're confident and retirement is confident and assured. It's a great resource with action items that you can begin implementing right now, and it's going to tell you exactly how to keep your financial future on track. So all you have to do is be one of the next 10 callers at 866-482-9559, 866-482-9559, and you can receive this retirement planning checklist. Hey, that's all the time we have today. We'll see you next week right here on Retire with Purpose.
Hi, Casey Weade, president of Howard Bailey Financial. Planning for a secure and independent retirement requires staying on top of the latest trends. New retirement regulations, trillion-dollar stimulus packages, and a pivotal election year all need to be taken into consideration. The Howard Bailey team is here to support you. We develop retirement plans driven by meaning and purpose, so you can stop worrying about what's next and focus on what means the most to you today. Call now for a complimentary consultation and a customized plan of action.